Hey everyone, welcome to the African Football Roundup. This is going to be a weekly segment that we do on the African Five-A-Side podcast YouTube page and across podcasting platforms, where we're just going to recap the happenings of African football over the weekend, and as well as the performances of African football players around the world. So this week we're going to be discussing the unveiling of a new football tournament in Africa, the African Football League. And I think it's something that the wider footballing world is watching with curiosity, with interest. And so I think, why not discuss it? So for those that don't know, the African Football League was initially announced as the African Super League. It was an idea of Gianni Infantino's, and he announced it on TP Mazembe's 80th birthday. And initially when he announced it as, a 20-team competition with prize money of $200 million, and that clubs would have to buy themselves in with a $20 million buy-in. And I think immediately it was met with a lot of consternation. Detractors were saying that Gianni Infantino didn't really know the African football market. How can he be throwing around numbers like this? Very few clubs, in fact, no clubs besides Al Ahly in Egypt, have a yearly budget of $20 million, and none of them can actually pay that just to buy themselves into a competition. And so it was unilaterally announced. The stakeholders were not really consulted. And as a result, people were very, very standoffish about it at the beginning. That said, the African Champions League is also broken. It's a competition where for the last 5 to 10 years, it's really cost more to participate in than any kind of prize money that you would win from it. An Algerian club a few years ago, CR Belouizdad, I believe, traveled more than 35,000 kilometers in the group stages. And when you consider the cost of, either chartering your own airplane or flying across the continent, usually with layovers in Turkey or Qatar or the United Arab Emirates, I mean, it's really, really expensive. And so it became a tournament that was more of a burden than anything else. So people didn't really have the kind of opposition that they had towards the European Super League. That one of the reasons was they believed that the European Super League either needs to be revamped or we need to create a new competition that's going to replace the Champions League. And the truth is that at the moment, we have neither. The Champions League is running parallel to the African Football League. And at the same time, it's not being revamped, it's not being renovated, nothing like that. And at the same time, you have the exact same teams that are playing in the African Champions League. They're also playing in the African Football League. So there's a kind of parallel league. It's not a replacement. And at the same time, it's not really a super league. This competition kicked off this weekend. There were 8 teams. You had Wydad Casablanca, Esperance de Tunis, Al Ahly, Petro Atletico from Angola, TP Mazembe, Enyimba from Nigeria, Simba, and Mamelodi Sundowns. So as of right now, there's a lot of confusion. Is this a FIFA competition? Is this a CAF competition? At the moment, it's a FIFA competition. And I think if you take a look at the sponsors, it's very clear. CAF just signed a deal with Puma, and the African Football League is outfitted by Macron. If you also look at the different sponsors in the African Football League, you have Visit Saudi, you have Visit Rwanda as well. I think anybody with any rudimentary knowledge of FIFA and their financial partners know that those two countries are very, very close to Gianni Infantino and FIFA. And I think this is an important question to ask about it being a FIFA competition or a CAF competition, because CAF is supposed to have African football's best interests at heart, whereas FIFA has a much wider scope. And when you consider how much importance FIFA are giving the FIFA Club World Cup, you sort of wonder if this African Football League is perhaps a first preliminary step into a wider Super League across the world, some kind of global Super League, considering, especially, like I said, how much importance they place on the Club World Cup. Maybe they're going to morph this Club World Cup into some kind of, global Champions League where they have, 4 clubs from Africa, 4 clubs from Asia, 4 clubs from Europe, 4 clubs from South America, and 4 from North America. So after one match day, there's no real clear guiding principle to this tournament. Everyone seems lost. It's been confirmed that the Champions League will continue. The preliminary rounds of that competition are underway. Not only will it continue, but the exact same clubs in the Champions League are playing in the African Football League. And it really does seem like more of a FIFA experiment, more than a tournament with a long term vision. You had, your Colinas, your Arsene Wenger's, Yuri Djorkaeff's, all the FIFA top brass were in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, for the kicking off of this tournament. And it's going to be interesting to see if that kind of momentum carries into the latter rounds or if it was just really there for the inauguration. Anyways, the football was interesting. I thought it was a great test run for Tanzania with the upcoming AFCON in 2027 being awarded to East Africa. On the pitch, I thought Al Ahly versus Simba was the first match, and I thought it was the best match. It finished in a 2-2 draw. Al Ahly were wasteful early on. I thought Simba played well. But with a 2-2 draw, I do believe Al Ahly have the advantage in the return leg. Sundowns tactically as innovative as ever with Khulani Makwena, and I do expect them with a 2-0 lead to comfortably beat Petro Atletico back home in South Africa. Wydad also very comfortable versus Enyimba, who... here's another question. What are Enyimba doing in the African Football League? Not only are they not even the top West African team, they're not even the top Nigerian team according to the most recent CAF rankings. I know historically they have a lot of glory, but the fact that Enyimba are in this tournament not only dilutes the competition of the tournament, but also it's led people to ask questions of the merit of it all. Are they there because Nwankwo Kwanu is the president of Enyimba, and obviously he has very close ties to Arsene Wenger and FIFA as well? I mean, that's one of the things that everybody's not really sure about. And finally, TP Mazembe versus Esperance. I think this is the only tie that's really still up for grabs. Mazembe, I thought, looked quite decent. Kinzumbi, the winger, looked very dangerous. Sheikh Komara scored his third very important goal. He's just 19 years old, the Malian midfielder. He scored in the Champions League preliminary rounds, home and away from home, and now he has a goal in the African Football League. And so, yeah, and finally, one last geopolitical note. I thought it was interesting that TP Mazembe didn't wear the Fly Rwanda sponsor. And for those that don't know, the DRC and Rwanda have had very contentious political relationship over the last 5 to 10 years because of what's happening on the DRC's eastern border, where Rwanda are accused of financing and supporting these M23 rebels, which have been sort of attacking the eastern border, according to the Congolese government. So we'll see how this competition sort of continues to unfold. Was it just a very important kickoff, inauguration, and now FIFA is just not going to care anymore? Is each step of the competition going to be widely celebrated? I think as African football observers, we're all just wondering, is this going to replace the Champions League? If it is, in what way? Is it going to be under the umbrella of FIFA or CAF, number one? Number two, I don't think people in Africa are opposed to having a sort of quarter-final tournament as this football league is. The real expensive parts of the CAF Champions League is really the preliminary rounds and the group stages. But if we could have, for example, some kind of tournament in one city, in one venue, starting from the quarterfinals, and we can, as journalists, sort of all flock to that city, and we'll stay there for 10 to 14 days, and we'll play the matches there, and it'll be like a big festival, kind of like we do for the AFCON. I think that could be something that not only saves clubs money, but it could also add a lot of marketing value to the tournament as well. So at the moment, it's all very up in the air. We're a little bit confused, but I do think that overall, the African Football League is a positive development for African football because it's bringing in revenue, it's bringing in more eyes, but at the same time, it does lack a very clear long-term vision. Leave you with this conversation I had with Bassil Mikdadi on how things have changed for Palestinian footballers since October 7th, but at the same time, they haven't really changed at all. Thanks, and I'll see you next week. Hey, Bassil, we're just going to start off with a very simple question. What is the appetite for football right now in Palestine?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, when you are confronted with something as serious as a war and the death of thousands, you automatically get a hard reset of your priorities. So I do think that for the people who are living through the war, perhaps there isn't a sort of focus on football. I think for the wider Palestinian community, football is so intertwined in our daily lives that it's hard to take the focus completely off. And I think what we saw after the events of October 7th was a realization that football could play a vital role in bringing attention to what's going on in Palestine. And we saw, I think, sort of maybe a knee-jerk reaction from some of the European bodies in football, and a counter reaction to that, to make sure that the wider world understood what was going on, understood the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and we saw a slew of footballers come out and lend their voices to the Palestinians and their struggle. Yeah, I think I've been heartened by the reaction of the football world as a whole. Now, I think when we say that, we have to be honest with ourselves and say that European football dominates so much of the discourse, dominates so much of the coverage, dominates so much of the public space, that if a European body, or if a European club, or if a European league says something, it resonates more just because of their reach. I think if you take a step back and you look at the global reaction, you see one of solidarity with the Palestinians across the world, on all the continents. I mean, I've seen banners and tifos expressing solidarity with the Palestinians in South America, in Africa, in Far East Asia. This is not just an issue that resonates with people of the same ethnicity, Arabs, or people more or less of the same religion, Muslims. It's something that I think has spilled over, and you are seeing solidarity being expressed by even fans of European clubs. I think a great example is what happened in La Liga over this weekend. The first game this match day was Osasuna against Granada in El Sadar, and La Liga had expressly prohibited the display of Palestinian flags. The fans did not listen, and we saw that repeated in Real Sociedad's game, in Sevilla's game against Real Madrid. Even in the Premier League, we saw Palestinian flags at Anfield, a banner that says, "For God's sake, save Gaza." Players have come out and I think risked a little bit, because what we're seeing here is a dichotomy, and it seems that Palestine has the support of the people, and the Israeli army has the support of governments and powerful entities, and you've seen a clash. I think the Premier League probably wanted to put out a statement just condemning what happened on October 7th, and portraying the 75-year-old conflict as something that has only been going on for 2 weeks, and is more or less about people being shot at or kidnapped during a rave, which is a complete reduction and a complete misrepresentation of what actually is going on, which is the world's longest ongoing military occupation, apartheid, according not just to me but to the UN, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Israeli human rights groups themselves. And so it was a little bit weird to see that it could cause a controversy to say, yeah, probably in the light of people dying, you shouldn't stand in solidarity with a state that is guilty of those practices. Yeah, stand in solidarity, express your sympathy for innocent people on both sides that have lost their lives, but it shouldn't be the reaction to light up the Wembley Arch in the colors of the Israeli flag because of that. And I think a lot of credit has to go to individuals and supporters groups, individual footballers who have stuck their neck out. I think Anwar Ghazi of FC Mainz, and Yusuf Attal in Liga, Masraoui as well, who plays for Bayern. All these guys got suspended more or less for what they said. And if you look at the juxtaposition, if somebody posted something that was the same message but in support of Israel, they didn't get fined, they didn't get called out. It was totally fine. So I mean, I think it's really heartwarming to see people speak for justice, speak for the Palestinian cause, show the world that this is something that is about humanity and about a clear right and wrong. And I have nothing but respect for the fans, the supporters, groups of players who have gone out and risked their own livelihood sometimes to communicate that message.
And that's the wider footballing world, but you've been in contact with actual Palestinian footballers, and what have they told you about their ability or inability to continue playing at the moment?
It's difficult. We were in a completely different world on October 6th. The my mind, the mind of the players was the October friendly window, the last set of friendlies before World Cup qualifying, at least for us, starts in Asia. It was all about, okay, where are we at? Who will start those games? Who are we going to test out? Combinations, your typical football focused topics were front of mind for myself, for a lot of the players. Since then, the Palestine national team had to pull out of friendlies in Malaysia. They were scheduled to play against Tajikistan and either India and or Malaysia in the last friendly window. And yeah, they couldn't go. They couldn't go because from a logistical issue, it was impossible to cross the land border from the West Bank into Jordan and then take the flight. The reason why it was impossible wasn't so much that the border has only been open for a couple hours a day. It was more that once the events of October 7th happened, settlers in the West Bank took to the streets with the support of the Israeli military. And if you're a Palestinian on the roads in between, city A and city B, or going from your village to a city, or trying to traverse the entire West Bank to get to the border, you're likely to be met with settlers looking to extract some sort of vigilante justice. And that has been the situation now for the past 2 weeks. What the Palestine national team has been trying to do is to get out of the country, because what we know now is there is going to be a suspension of sport in the country for very, very long time. You have to also consider that there's also a suspension of Israeli sport. That's how bad things have become and have deteriorated. So the plan for the Palestinian national team is to get out of the country and start an external training camp with the eye to get ready for World Cup qualifiers in November, and obviously further ahead, the Asian Cup in 2024. The problem is right now we're talking team doctor, coaching staff, individual players can't really risk getting out of their house to travel. So it's going to be a big logistical problem, and we'll see in the coming days if they're able to get out of the country and prepare for what are very, very important World Cup qualifiers against Lebanon on November 16th and Australia on November 21st.
And we spoke a few months ago, and you told me that this was a promising generation of players. Does that exacerbate matters just even a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. Look, like I said, I think this was I wouldn't say the last chance, but this is a generation that really came onto the radar after Palestine made their breakthrough, which was qualifying for their first Asian Cup finals in 2015. The team that was sent there was a lot of the old guard, and then there was a renewal with some of these guys that were along for the ride and were the young guys of that generation and have now become the leaders. So yeah, you're talking about players who are either in their prime or approaching their prime. They're ready for a breakthrough. I think a lot of people who follow Palestinian football can give a lot of credit to the powers that be for an achievement like qualifying for 3 straight Asian Cup finals. But at the same time, when they're looking for a signature match or a signature achievement, usually it's, did you get to the third round of World Cup qualifying? So were you ipso facto one of the best 12 teams in Asia? No, that didn't happen. Did you get out of your group at the Asian Cup? No, that didn't happen. Maybe a little bit unlucky with the draw in both the 2015 and 2019 Asian Cups. So it seemed like this was the time, and obviously the draw, I think, was an okay draw. Could have been maybe a little bit easier, could have been a little bit tougher, but there was definitely a feeling before all of this happened that we are comfortably better than Lebanon. We're in a better spot than Lebanon right now. We should be able to play this away game, get at least a point, and then see what happens when Australia comes to Palestine, right? We know that Australia aren't good travelers. They've particularly struggled away to Jordan, so playing in Palestine would be all that much more harder on an artificial pitch and a stadium that is very, uh, cramped and closely packed. So there was a lot of excitement for that, and obviously, when you see something like this, kind of cutting you at the knees and potentially destroying your dreams of doing something at the next Asian Cup or making a run at qualifying for a 48 team World Cup. It's very frustrating for the fans and the players.
And on the African continent, we're very used to national teams not being able to play at home for several different reasons, whether they be security or lack of infrastructure. Can you just quantify how much of a disadvantage that is for Palestinian national team in the Asian context?
It's a huge disadvantage. I mean, home field advantage is everything in international football. And yeah, it probably means a little bit more in a place like Asia or Africa, where you have an established set of big teams, but you can sort of equal the playing field if they come to your house and they have to play on a not so perfect pitch and they have to play with a hostile crowd. It's a great equalizer. Um, it's important, I think, for the listeners to know that Palestine has never lost a match on Palestinian soil on a FIFA day. So any competitive match played in Palestine, they've either won or drawn, and that included, matches against teams stronger than them by all accounts. The UAE Golden Generation came to Palestine; they only managed to draw. Saudi Arabia came to Palestine. Palestine really should have won that match. It ended in a 0-0 draw. That team went on to qualify for the World Cup. Uzbekistan in the last World Cup qualifying came to Palestine. They lost. So there is this fortress mentality of like, oh yeah, if someone's going to come to Palestine, they're not coming out of here with a win. So it is a huge advantage. I think what has happened with Palestinian football and the footballers that represent the Palestinian national team is that they've become very resilient in being able to play without the home field advantage. So I would say Palestine are better travelers than a lot of teams that are in and around their level, because they've just done it so much. I mean, this is a team that hasn't played in Palestine for the last 4 years. The last match was that 0-0 draw I mentioned against Saudi Arabia in qualifying for the Qatar World Cup. They didn't play because there was COVID, the logistical issues. There was supposed to be a return after 4 years to their home ground in Jerusalem. That's not going to happen now. So it is a disadvantage. At the same time, I do think these players are a little bit more conditioned to playing on neutral territory, and I think they're relatively good travelers. And that doesn't really get talked about, that they can go on the road and play well and get results. You have to keep in mind that for this last Asian Cup, they reduced qualifying from 6 matches, so a home and away between 3 teams in a 4-team group, to just 3 matches in a centralized location. And they picked, I don't know why, but the Asian Football Confederation decided we're going to have Palestine's group hosted in Mongolia, by Mongolia, on a horrible pitch, like probably the worst pitch I've seen in all my time covering football. I mean, really, really bad. Artificial pitch, completely torn up. I mean, there are pitches that I play on every weekend that are better than that pitch that they played in Mongolia. And Palestine, they did well. They went to hostile territory. They won their first match 1-0 against Mongolia. And then they faced Yemen and Philippines, 2 teams that were at the last Asian Cup in 2019, and beat them 5-0 and 4-0 on that horrendous pitch. So I think if Palestine has to do this, as long as nothing gets in the way of them having some sort of legitimate training and preparation time, I think they'll be okay no matter where they end up playing their matches. But obviously, it would be so much better for them to host the match in Jerusalem.
And can you tell us about historically how the Palestinian national team has been sort of able to overcome these challenges? I saw that you wrote about the Second Intifada in particular, but in general, how has this national team been able to overcome these extra sporting obstacles?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think back to the Second Intifada and what the team was able to do then, but from a from a big picture standpoint, you have to remember that during the second Intifada, there wasn't a league for Palestine to kind of lean on it and collect players from. So it was a team that was heavily reliant on bringing players from abroad. That said, there are a lot of good memories. I think for older fans, they'll remember, an Arab Cup where Palestine were the big entertainers. They scored a lot of goals, didn't get out of the group, but played a lot of classic matches. A 3-3 draw against the hosts Kuwait comes to mind. I think they also played like a 1-1 or 2-2 against Jordan. Like a lot of classic matches by a team that was sort of cobbled together from all corners of the globe, playing during particularly difficult times. There have been also times where the political situation just gets in the way, and Palestine couldn't continue qualifying for 2010 for the 2010 World Cup because it was just too much. You couldn't get half the team because they were stuck in Gaza, no permit. They had to withdraw from World Cup qualifying. So there are instances where historically they've been able to overcome and give a good account of themselves, and there are other instances where they're not able to do that. Now, that said, that was also done in an environment where there wasn't really a league being consistently played in Palestine. Fast forward 20 years now, you do have a league that's been consistently played. That it's not the greatest league in the world, but if you look at like the players in the national team, a lot of them are products of that league. The captain Musab al-Battat is a product of that league. The vice captain Tamer Salam, who plays in Thailand right now, is a product of that league. Rami Hamadi, who is, for my money, a top 5 Asian goalkeeper, is a product of that league. So for all its shortcomings, it is developing players, and there are young players that are coming through the pipeline. I think a good example, in more recent history of what this team is able to overcome in difficult circumstances is what they did in 2021. So after COVID stopped international football in 2020, Palestine resumed play in 2021 in June. They had 3 games, which was basically, I think for me and a lot of fans, a litmus test on what to expect from this team going forward, because they had crashed and burned in World Cup qualifying after securing a famous win against Uzbekistan. They lost to Yemen, they lost to Singapore, and that just destroyed their chances of getting to round 3 of World Cup qualifying. They fired the coach, Nuruddin Walid Ali. People weren't happy that an assistant on the staff, Makram Daboub, was the guy that came in to take charge. And this was all happening in May 2021, where there were also there was also an eruption of violence because Israeli settlers were trying to evict people from their homes in Jerusalem. There were incursions into Al-Aqsa Mosque that ended up resulting in a flare-up of violence and a war on Gaza and intercommunal violence. It was a mess, but the team managed to get out of the country. They were in camp for 3 weeks. And, all credit to Makram Daboub. He whipped them up into shape. They were playing a high press. They did really well. They destroyed Singapore 4-0, beat Yemen 3-0. And then they had an Arab Cup qualifier against Comoros, where they also beat them 5-1, despite going down a goal within the first 5 minutes. And I think that gives me and a lot of followers of this national team a bit of heart that, if we can get out of the country in the next couple of days and give this coach some time to guide his players on what he wants, we'll be ready to go. So as long as things don't get in the way and the team can actually have some sort of preparatory period, I think they will be okay and they'll be able to play up to expectations.
You've written very recently about this Palestinian footballer named Hazm Rikhawi. Can you just tell us his story and what he's had to go through?
Yeah, I think this is a perfect example of what Palestinian football is about, in that it doesn't matter kind of what happens. Palestinian football keeps going. You have to keep in mind, if we talk about the big picture, this is a national team whose association appeared in 1928, disappeared, was kind of around for the next 20 years, disappeared for the next 50 years, came back in 1998, and is now a team that you can confidently consider one of the top 15 teams in Asia. Even in that period where there was no national team, there were still players being developed, right? The first international player, the first foreign player in the Greek Super League for Ajax Athens was a guy by the name of Firas al-Mughrabi. So or Ibrahim al-Maghribi, sorry. Um, that just goes to show that there was talent, and Palestinians are able to achieve in spite of the hardships that are in their way. To get back to the story of Hazem Hazem is a guy who's been playing football for the past 2 decades professionally. He's from Gaza. He's from the southern city of Rafah near the Egyptian border. And during the war on Gaza that was termed Operation Iron Lead, he was studying at his technical college in Gaza City. And he got onto a little minibus, him and 9 of his classmates, to go back to Rafah. And during their journey, his bus was struck by a missile from an Israeli F-16. Everybody on that bus died, including what they thought Hazem Mikhawi as well. They also thought he was dead. His body arrived at the hospital. He was all burnt up, full of shrapnel. So they wrapped him up and they put him in the fridge in the morgue. 5 hours later, a woman comes to identify the body of her dead son, and she realizes that Hazem's hand is moving. And they come to the realization that this man is alive. So they pull him out of the fridge, do what they need to do to resuscitate him, but it was still a question mark on whether or not Hazem would be able to pursue a career in football. And lo and behold, a couple of years after that, I think 2 or 3 years later, he moves from Gaza to the West Bank, which is traditionally the first step you make in your career as a footballer to at least earn a little bit more money. And he played for 8 different clubs in the top flight of the West Bank Premier League. Had a great career and decided beginning of this season, you know what, I'm done. I want to go back home. I want to go play for Shabab Rafah. He goes back to Shabab Rafah, and about 10 days ago or so, his house gets bombed. And a picture made its way out of Gaza to me of him, battered and bruised, but still alive, being pulled from the rubble in his, in a pair of football shorts. And I think that's just very emblematic of what Palestinian footballers go through, especially those from the Gaza Strip. They have lived through many wars. And despite, wars, despite losing family, despite maybe having their houses destroyed, they keep going. Hazem has represented Palestine at youth level. He never got a senior national team cap, but, there are many footballers like him who are either in the Strip or out of the Strip watching the events unfold, who will, go back and do their job and play football and keep going despite all the horrible things that are going on.
Where can people follow you and the rest of your work, which is obviously even more important at the moment than it always has been?
Yeah, of course. You can follow my work at footballpalestine.com. If you want all my articles to go directly to your inbox, you can subscribe to my Substack. There's a free and paid version of that, which is the same website, it's footballpalestine.substack.com. I'm not very active on all social media. Twitter, or I guess X is what it's being called these days. My handle is @footballpalestine. Football as in the Spanish spelling, because it was too long to fit into one handle. So yeah, you can find me there, and be happy to accept all the new followers and educate them about the wonderful world of Palestinian football.